Actors, we've all got issues, so let's talk about them. I'm your host, Juan Ayala, and this is Actors with Issues. In today's episode, we speak with Lane Factor, star of the FX comedy series Reservation Dogs, Season 3, streaming August 2nd on Hulu. This interview was recorded on July 11th, prior to the SAG-AFTRA strike. Lane Factor is in the building. Lane, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I was watching a few of your podcasts. It's really, really good. So I'm really, really happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So before we dive into Res Dogs, I want to go back a little bit. So your career, you're only a few years in. You are rather young, but you already have so much more experience under your belt compared to some other actors who maybe are sort of like fresh out of college. So I'm curious, with Res Dogs having been your first audition, that is correct,
Mm.
right?
Yes, that's
So
correct.
with that experience, what would you say you've learned in the process of like going through that sort of network audition process? Was it what you expected? Was it different?
It was definitely different from what I expected. It's definitely longer than I thought it would be.
Mhm.
But also thinking back in retrospective, it kind of made sense. uh, but yeah, going through those audition process, we had ones in the open casting call they did in Oklahoma City that had like several hundred people show up. And then they had a smaller one in two small ones in Tulsa where they would narrow, or every time we went there, it narrowed down, went from like 24, then it went to like 8 people.
Mhm.
And then after that, they flew everyone out to LA who they were looking at. So that's where I got to meet Devery, DeFaro, Paulina, Elva, basically the whole crew.
Mhm.
And but it was there that we got to meet Sterling, Taika Waititi, or more of the casting directors and casting staff. Uh, so that was probably one of the coolest experiences. That was the first time I ever got to travel to LA,
Mhm.
and so I've always been kind of afraid of flights. So that was a new kind of more of a new experience for me, just in general. But the whole casting process, it was fun, especially because every time I went to I got a call back and we went to those things. Sterling was always there, or
Mhm.
people I knew tend to be there, like people who I made friends with at the previous casting call. So it was, I guess that also helped a little bit more. Sterling always tried to keep like a friendly, casual environment going on in there. I think that helped
Mhm.
keep everyone's nerves down a little bit. Uh, yeah, it was definitely different from what I expected.
Fast forwarding to getting cast on the show and working on the pilot, how do you say you have changed and grown from day one on the pilot to now, 3 seasons into the show?
Man, so I feel like I've learned so much, just like even from simple things like trying not to look at the camera. That was a problem I had. I remember having like, quite a bit during shooting the pilot, but I don't think any of those shots went in, thankfully. Uh, but I've going back, but I had, the whole cast there. I had Devery, DeFaro, Paulina, all of them who have been in the industry longer than I have. Of course, Sterling's been in this industry a lot longer than I have. So I've always been able just to turn to them for help, for more insight on things, for any questions I had. They're always more than happy to answer. But I think I've learned a lot from them, and I'm always striving to improve myself. I think I definitely have, I still 3 seasons later have a lot to learn. Uh, but it's something I agree with open arms. But I will say there's one thing I still do from the pilot that I'm really mad at. That's sometimes I have this like subtle like smile on my resting face. Like I did it a ton during the pilot, and once I noticed like I couldn't stop. But I realized like watching some early shots of season 3, as we were filming, and just running behind the director's stand, seeing the footage being played back. I'd see that I would do it occasionally, and I'm like, all right, we're gonna go do another one. But it was just like the subtle smile I had on my face, just and like sometimes it was like the most, it was like a dramatic scene or something, and I would just have that on in the background. But I did that a lot during the pilot, and I made sure tried. I've always been making sure trying not to do that going forward. So
Yeah.
so far, still work in progress. We're getting there.
But I mean, I think that adds a lot to who Cheese is. He's a cheery guy. He doesn't like getting into problems. He, stays positive. He's an optimistic dude. So he wouldn't have sort of like, what they call like a resting bitch face. He wouldn't look
Yeah.
grumpy. He would just sort of always be like pleasant. He's a pleasant dude. So, it adds a lot to the character. And I know you've talked before about how sort of all of your characters are a bit like the actors who are portraying them. But I remember Devry saying that with Laura, she um as an actor, she was well aware she had to like leave where she grew up in order to become a successful working actor. So like for you, was it, I mean, for you it's a bit different because the show films nearby where you grew up, correct, in Oklahoma
Right.
or OK City?
Right.
Yeah.
It so they filmed up in Tulsa, which is I live just outside of Oklahoma City.
Mm-hmm.
So that is literally an hour, 30-minute drive from where I live. So on weekends or like if they had like more than 2 or 3 days they didn't need me, I'll just come home.
Yeah.
But I have worked on a few things that have been more out of state or stuff that I can't just go home to. Uh and yeah, it's a little hard, especially going from uh, Reservation Dogs to Fablemans, where I was out in LA for almost 2 months, basically that whole summer I spent out there.
Yeah.
Um, it was definitely a bit harder, uh, to say the least. So I think that's just one of the things that in this industry you kind of have to get used to and kind of have to accept that not only are there going to be some roles that's not going to be perfectly you, you might not be the most comfortable with everything you do, but that's just part of it to step out that comfort zone. And also that you're sometimes going to go places, they're really cool places, but you're not going to have that opportunity to go home when you want to, or
Yeah.
sometimes you're just randomly longing to be in your bed or see your pets and stuff. It's just kind of one of those things that come with the industry, I guess.
Yeah, definitely takes getting used to, especially, whenever you're auditioning for things and it sort of tells you where they'll be filming, you sort of think like, oh God, like, can I go out there for this long? Or, of course you can, because, actors have to be available, but just sort of getting used to that process of, especially with, your first gig filming so close to home. And then you're like, oh, right, not everything films an hour
Yeah.
away.
Yeah, I remember when I first started, one of the things I remember thinking the most when I first got the part, I was like, man, I'm so happy they're filming in Oklahoma, because I know for a time they were actually considering thinking about filming in New Mexico.
Mhm.
But Sterling was pretty adamant that he wanted it to be filmed in Oklahoma. And he tells that story to us all the time. He says to this day he's still surprised he didn't get any like pushback from FX. So
Right.
huge thanks to him. Uh, but yeah, I've always been a nervous flyer. I've been afraid of flights. I'm sure I have lots of relatives who'll tell me horror stories of me like kicking and screaming not to get on a plane when I was younger. So being, of course, being an actor, you're gonna have to travel a lot, um, and that's just something I remember just trying to get used to. I'm still trying to get used to it. I think I am actually pretty good now. It just kind of depends on where we're going. Like but other than that, that's something I've always kind of struggled with. It's just my fear of flights. So that's one of the things the main thing I was like, okay, this is the thing I got to get over in order to continue doing what I love.
Yeah.
So I think finally after almost 4 years of doing this, I think I've finally gotten over that fear of flight. Until we fly through a cloud, then that's where it all comes rushing back.
Until the turbulence kicks in. Yeah.
Yeah.
And with this particular episode in season two, Stay Golden Cheesy Boy, it was a very cheese-centered story. And I'm sure it sort of felt very different that you were sort of on set like every day that week, and had much more dialogue than you're used to. So what was that whole experience like having this like story, this episode and story centered around you? And not just centered on you, but not with your sort of core cast, because you were in a whole different environment for that episode.
Yeah, that episode was a really fun one to do. I remember for the longest time I was kind of dreading working on it, uh, because of course, I've never been like in too many scenes without the main cast there. You know, even when they're not there, I usually had someone who I at least knew to like bounce off of, like a big.
Mm,
Um, but so I was kind of dreading that, because I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be with an environment of some new kids I don't know, some new guys I don't know. I don't know how I'm gonna gel with them. They're not the main cast. I'm gonna be doing this episode all week. I was really nervous about that. And I was like, I gotta, there's two kind of emotional parts in the episode. So I'm like, I'm not really sure if I can get to that point, let alone by myself, without having, my usual people who I talk to there. um, but getting to talk to Sterling, Black Horse, Mika Z, and Bobby Wilson. Bobby and Mika Z helped write the episode, and
mm,
the episode is actually based on experience Bobby Wilson had when he was younger. Getting to talk to them and their inside of the episode, how they're planning to approach it, how they kind of want me to approach it. That really helped, I guess, boost my confidence a little bit. Of course, Black Horse directed the episode. He done a fantastic job. And then getting to meet the actual guys in there, super cool guys, probably some of the
mm,
coolest dudes I know, really, really down to earth. Uh, that just helped me a little bit, but I was still always like kind of nervous. Like, this is still something I don't really not really familiar with. This is kind of a little outside of the realm of everything I've done so far.
mm,
And, I still got those emotional scenes to do, but those proved to be my favorite scenes to do, actually. And that whole episode just kind of, it became my favorite episode, not
mm.
just during filming, but like watching it back, it became my favorite episode. So because I just remember everything I was worried about, and then having everyone there, it was just a really fun experience for me. And also just kind of showed me that, I probably doubt myself a little too much.
I mean, actors, we're our own worst critics, as sort of intense as actual critics can be, and all of that. Would No one's harder on ourselves than, or harder on us than we are on ourselves.
Yeah, I
Um,
I try not to like watch back things that I do, whether it's just like a small handheld video that my sister captured, or the supporting scenes I had in Fablemans. I'm like, because I'll always nitpick something I did in there. One thing that's kind of ruined forever for me now with
gosh.
the whole acting thing is I can never watch TV or movies the same without knowing if that camera veers a little too far to the left, you're going to see the
Oh yeah.
hole right there. And that's just one of those things. I'm just like, oh yeah, just behind this camera, there's like 300 dudes just sweating right there, just watching the actors yell at each other. And that's just kind of like one of those things that when I put that in my head, it just kind of like brings me out of the whole thing temporarily. So it's just like kind of one of those things that that's just a little harder to immerse myself now, especially in like animated stuff and voiceover stuff. It's just like I can just imagine this actor or actress in the booth screaming their lungs out. And that's just one of the things with acting now, having that more insight into it. Something kind of always known before, but it's like, seeing it in person now, it's just like that's more apparent to you
Yeah.
now.
So since you're just a few years into your career, have there been any like discoveries that you've made so far about the entertainment industry or what it takes to be an actor? I feel like there's so much misinformation out there, or sort of like myths about, Hollywood or whatever, Hollywood's a sign, it's not a place or anything.
Uh,
But yeah, what comes to mind?
so things about that is that the main actors you see like in Hollywood now, like in like the big budget movies, that's only probably about like 5% of all the actors. There's most actors work on like indie stuff, or like more smaller scale things. So it's just like the actors you see in like big television series or like big streaming service movies and stuff. Those are such a small percentage of actors. Like, I really didn't know that. I thought the industry was like just now starting to like boom out more, because now I'm seeing like more people who I haven't seen before. But it's like, no, those people have all been there for years. It's just like they haven't been noticed. And so I'm just like, I try to watch more movies that maybe aren't as mainstream, or more TV shows. So that's something me and my friends do, is we'll look for like those kinds of shows. And a lot of them are like really good, and things that we wish got more attention.
Mhm.
Um, but other things are just like, Hollywood industry, it's brutal. It's cutthroat. There's always so many things, people going for roles. There's it's people aren't exaggerating. They say, Hollywood chews you up and spits you back out.
Yeah.
It's destined to happen at some point. Uh, but there's a lot of really nice people I've met. I don't think I've had a negative interaction with one so far, which I'm really thankful for. Um, but I know not everyone is like the nicest person in the world.
Right.
I try to be nice to everyone I see. Just a humble flex, I guess. but but I know that Hollywood is brutal, and there's like dark things that happened, and dark secrets. There's always like shady people. But I'm thankful that I've only had positive interactions with everyone who I've talked to, and I haven't
Yeah.
seen as much negative side as like someone like my co-stars have.
I feel like with, the entertainment industry, so many people, I mean, we know it is cutthroat because, if an actor has a good agent and manager, they're auditioning maybe 100 times a year and they're lucky to book a handful of those roles. And I mentioned to a cousin of mine over the 4th of July weekend, talking about the writer's strike because they, know I'm in the industry, and asked about that. And I was like, yeah, and SAG-AFTRA might be going on strike, and because the actors, that's like the actors union. And he was um, wait, seriously? Like actors make millions of dollars. How much more do they want? And I said, most actors are not making millions of dollars.
No,
Most members of SAG don't even make enough to qualify for health insurance. And that's not a very high requirement. It's I think around 30,000 if I'm not mistaken. And that's like half of a average salary. So I feel like there is that misconception out there of like all these A-listers, like, well, sure, but look at all these other like supporting roles in films and the one-liners in the TV show. You watch an episode of Law and Order, there's like 30 co-star and guest star actors in a single
mhm.
episode because they need all of those people to support the story.
Yeah,
And
like
people
we're
just
not
sort of don't realize that.
we're not all Marvel A-listers,
Right.
as much as I wish I was. uh, but but yeah, it's really just like you said, like not all actors can make a living on this on acting. It's not the most secure job because you
Right.
don't know when your next job is going to be. You could go from a project to another project like the following day,
Mhm.
or you could wait months in between work. It's something you just don't know.
Yeah.
Especially now with the actors strike, that's all of us not working at the moment. So I have a friend who's trying to get into acting, and he's done a lot of auditions. He hasn't gotten anything, but I'm just like, don't bet your life on this.
Yeah.
I love it. I want to continue doing it, but I know and I understand it's not the most secure job in the world.
It's great to hear you have that awareness of that because I feel like a lot of young actors, and maybe I'm not giving young actors enough credit, but I feel like a lot of young actors would do 3 seasons of a show that is so well received, like Res Dogs, and then think that like the industry is going to open up for them. And sadly, that's not the case. But it's great to hear that you don't have those expectations, so you're sort of mentally prepared. Because a lot of whenever I've booked a smaller on something, there's always a young actor I'll get a DM from or something, especially with the podcast and stuff. They'll ask like, did it lead to something else? And I'm like, no, it was just a one job. I had 2 lines on one episode of a show. That's not going to
Yeah.
snow. This industry's not a snowball effect like that. It is very much sort of
Uh,
like game of darts. It's a hit
as
or
as
miss.
as much as I wish it was a
Right.
snowball. As much as I wish it worked like that, I'd already be in a Godzilla movie and all the Marvel projects now. I'd be in DC. I'd be in all that right now.
Right.
But but yeah, I understand that this industry. I was extremely lucky and blessed to be in Res Dogs in the first 3 seasons, but I know that doesn't guarantee work down the road. It
Right.
might be able to lead to some other things, but that's not guaranteed. That's as much as, of course, we all wish that's how it works, but yeah, it's just not the deal. So I've just kind of mentally prepared, like I could be working next in 2 weeks, with this actor strike and writer strike. I could be working as soon as next week I could be doing something in 2 months. Who knows? My next thing might not come for a year.
Right.
And that's just one of the gambles. One of the
Yeah.
gambles of it.
And before we go, we always love to ask our guests in 10 words or less, what advice would you give to a young actor?
Always strive to improve yourself physically, mentally, and try to be a better person. Might be a little over 10 words, but
Totally fine. Awesome. Well, Lane, thank you so much, and congrats on such a great run. I know that so many of us fans are bummed that it's ending after 3 seasons, but better to go out on a high note when it's when you have wrapped up the story versus you know we know that there's a lot of shows out there that sort of overstay their welcome, but the show's been phenomenal and such a blast seeing you all in this story. So yeah, congrats and
I,
thank you so much for being here.
yeah, I really thank you for being here. And the show's been just a huge blessing for me. I've loved working on the show, people I've met through it. Um, I agree with you. Even though I wish it could have gone on a little longer, I know some shows overstay their welcome, and this is definitely a show I would not want to see that happen to. So I'm happy we're ending it on a really high note. That actually reminds me, small story, really small
Yeah,
story.
go ahead.
On my birthday, I just turned 18 like 2 weeks ago.
Happy
On
belated birthday.
Thank you. On my birthday, like at 7 o'clock at night, I got a call from Sterling, and I thought, I was like, oh, Sterling to wish me happy birthday. So I call it, and it was him telling me that season 3, that's gonna be the last season, and he's gonna make the official announcement the day after.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's one hell of a birthday gift. So so he tells me all that stuff, and me and him just probably talked for like another 10 minutes. And after we hung up, he called me like 3 hours later. He goes, oh yeah, and by the way, happy birthday. I completely forgot to say it was your birthday. He goes, yeah, it's one hell of a birthday gift, Lane. Happy birthday. So that was just something I got a really good laugh out of. I guess it kind of softened this whole thing a little bit for me, just knowing that I got that announcement on my birthday, and didn't even know it was.
At least he remembered after. He's like, yeah, probably not the best timing, but he at least wanted you to know before, I feel like it would have been, 10 times worse if you ended up finding out, on
Yeah.
Instagram or
I am
deadline or
glad he told
something.
me.
Yeah.
I am glad he told me when he did, because I was totally expecting him to tell me just happy birthday, like
Yeah.
nothing more. But then we ended up talking for about 10 minutes about the show ending.
Yeah.
So, and then he had no clue until I made a post on my Instagram like a couple hours later.
Yeah. Well, again, Lane, thank you so much for being here and for talking with us about the issues. And for everyone listening, watching, season 3 of Reservation Dogs premieres on August 2nd on Hulu. You can stream seasons 1 through 2, or 1 and 2. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to Actors with Issues on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and visit our YouTube channel for full video interviews. Actors with Issues is executive produced and hosted by Juan Ayala. See you next time.